Hi, everyone. This is Darren Friedman, and welcome to Quill and Curtain Podcast, the podcast for playwrights by playwrights. And I am super excited because we have a very special guest. And I know him from long ago, a really long time ago. That's how we got him on. The only reason he's on the podcast is because he knows me. He's a very, very special guest. His name is Don Michael Mendoza, or Don Mike, and he's the founder of DMH Mendoza Productions and co-founder and executive producer of Latido Productions, where through both entities he's produced on Broadway, including Smash and Here Lies Love, off-Broadway, Hazing You, and hundreds of cabarets, concerts, theatrical shows, and events nationally since 2012. Concurrently, he is an independent marketing professional who serves as the Director of Marketing and Media for the Filipino American Symphony Orchestra in Los Angeles. Mendoza is an alumnus of the Commercial Theater Institute in New York City and holds a BA in Musical Theater and Journalism and an MA in Strategic Communications from American University, where he sits on the Alumni Association Board. And he also sits on the board of directors for New York Theater Barn and the Filipino American Association of Pittsburgh. Hello, Don Mike. How are you?
Hi, Darren. I'm doing really well. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know, it's so funny because you are like the most legit person.
Oh,
Not that I don't have legit people on, but like you are legit.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's weird because people say that about me, and I'm like, no, I'm just here working, just doing my job, But it is awesome when you hear it all at once. You're like, wow, like we as a company and I as a producer have just been through a lot. And just I'm happy to do interviews like this because I have just so much stuff to share, and I hope it helps people that are listening.
Oh, I know it will. I know it will. So I'm going to kind of dig in deep, and
Sure.
I want to talk about subject. You know, my wife, Heather, has known you for quite a long time, and we met a gazillion years ago.
Yeah.
And I think I know of what I know of you. I think representation of voice and who you are and where you have come from matter a great deal in terms of your art. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about where you're from and how you've gotten here.
Sure. So I never thought that I would be a producer in life. I always thought that I would end up being somebody that works in mass media, broadcasting, um, or would have a day job somewhere. So this career that I'm in is something that came, I won't say as a surprise because there were definitely steps that I know led here, but it was something that is unplanned and in the best way. I'm raised in Pittsburgh, but born in Washington D.C., and so the two cities are kind of both my home. And I lived in D.C. for 13 years, and have of course, growing up in Pittsburgh, that's at least 18 around that time. And so I'm back in Pittsburgh now, and so my background, I went to college at American University, and um, I studied journalism, and the intent was to study political science, to be a journalist. And I ended up switching my track to musical theater instead. And then fast forward to graduating, I finished undergraduate school in this not the last recession, but the one before that in 2010. And acting wise, I wasn't really getting cast the way I wanted to. And in broadcasting, because of the recession, companies were actually firing people. I had a really great work study at WAMU, NPR's affiliate at the school, and worked with Diane Rehm, which was awesome. And I thought I was like right on track to go into where I was supposed to, but there were no jobs. And I had classmates who followed the trend, and they moved to Middle America to start a career, reporting on things like, legitimately, somebody was reporting on the slipperiest hill in Huntington, West Virginia during winter, and I did not want to do that. So I stayed in DC. And 2 years after I finished school, uh, I started a cabaret with a good friend of mine. His name is Reggie Kabiko, and we thought it was just going to be like a for fun, get seen kind of thing that would lead to auditions, and it turned out to be something way more. Lottie Doe started in the basement of a bar in DuPont Circle, underneath a sex shop, and it was, really just, you know what's that word, like just a mom and pop, like from the ground grassroots effort. That was, like I said, just something we thought would be where people could see us sing, but it turned into this production company that I have now, and it just, over time, evolving into a producer, made me learn that producing just means being very good at relationships and organizing. And the third pillar of that I tell people is also getting yelled at. That's the third side of being a producer that people don't realize sometimes. And and so I just kind of fell into it with the shows we were putting together, because more organizations would ask us or ask me to put things together for them or bring talent to them. And so over the years, now it's going to be year 13 of doing this. I did have a day job. I worked at the university in several different jobs, and I also worked at an outside company doing membership sales. And in 2018, I finished grad school in 2017. So I was still at AU during that, and I decided to make the leap and start doing marketing on my own, since that's what my master's is in, and then start just pursuing producing and production. And I'm not going to say it's been easy, but it's definitely been a worthwhile and rewarding experience, knowing that I'm doing what I want to do, and am pursuing projects that I'd like to. And so, yeah, I will say that I am an accidental producer, because I never thought I would be here. But I think the result of it, in addition to the obvious of, getting to where I'm at, was, I always tout that there were so many people that I dreamed of working with as an actor or as a performer. And I've worked with most of them now, even though I didn't pursue just being a performer. And so it proves that, you don't have to be one thing or another to end up crossing paths with people you want to collaborate with. So, but yeah, that's kind of the quick version of how I got here. And so now I incorporated DMH Mendoza Productions in 2021, during the like kind of the quote unquote post pandemic, when we were just kind of coming out of the heaviest part of it. And Latido now sits under that as kind of the concert cabaret department. So, but of course, that opened the door over the years. Now, like in my bio, I was able to pursue an off-Broadway opportunity in 2020. 2023 was a big year. So pursue an off-Broadway opportunity in the early part of the year with Hazing You, which is a new play. And then that led to, and I kid you not, the closing night of the off-Broadway show, I got the phone call. Broadway called on closing night, and it was Here Lies Love. And Clint Ramos, one of the lead producers, I was connected to him through my mutual friend, Laura Nicolas Olaes, who was in the first workshop. And we had a whole conversation about, what it's like to co-produce on Broadway and what that means in terms of money and effort. And I accepted that night. And that I think was a big pivot point. Because Broadway it's so big, but there were so many things I learned and people I met, and it opened so many doors to things. And it was an arena that I personally, like, to be super honest, never thought I would get to. I was just like, oh yeah, maybe one day, it's like a nice dream. But it happened, it came to be. And so, yeah, but so that's kind of then how things kind of exponentially increased into the producing career that I'm leading right now. So yeah.
That's amazing. I Here Lies Love is obviously a pivotal point for you in your career. Can you talk to me about, from okay, you get the phone call
Mm-hmm.
and somebody says, okay, you're going to produce this with me.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about what producing a Broadway show is like. Just, I mean, it's got to be mind blowing.
It is it takes so much emotion out of you to do it, in, I will say, the best and the worst ways. So my job specifically was a co-producer. And so what that means on the bigger scale of the structure of a Broadway company is that we were in charge of finding investors and fundraising. And the special thing about this production is that our lead producers, of which there were five, two of them were the first Filipino lead producers on Broadway ever, Clint Ramos and Jose Antonio Vargas, who in their own right, Clint is known for his costume design, Tony nominated, and Jose Antonio Vargas is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. And so the two of them coming in as these first lead producers, they saw um, the opportunity in encouraging a cohort of Filipino co-producers to come on to the scene, um, who have either lived in the world of producing or the arts or other parts of the arts industry that may not have been theater, to kind of help create the next generation after them. And so it changed in a huge way because I learned so many things that I did not expect. I call my so Laura, who I mentioned earlier, became my work wife because we decided to do a co-producing raise together, which you can do. And so, just for the truth of the matter, a co-producer on Here Lies Love, we were expected to raise $500,000, and in I believe it was like a 5 month period. So you're finding $100,000 a month roughly, and and that's part of a bigger capitalization of the show, which was $22 million. Theater is expensive. There's a lot of things that go into it, and so um, I think I learned how to pursue a lot of conversations. I think when I say it was like the best and the worst at the same time, like the best was learning how to pivot a lot, how to talk to people, because you had to go and we basically started from zero. Like, how do I find $500,000? And so I did an exercise that I learned at the Commercial Theater Institute, which was I quite literally went through my phone and made a list on a spreadsheet and thought about where do these people work, and to be super blunt, what tax bracket I thought they were in, and kind of started making phone calls and almost like a salesman. And my product was Here Lies Love. And so it then became a game of referrals because, of course, you make your first round, and the next day, most of that round doesn't they don't have that income or they can't provide at this time, so they'll refer. And so a lot of my people that ended up being my investors were like third, fourth round referrals. So persistency was a big thing that I learned, and um, the nuances of raising money connected to art. Most shows you just raise the money, but this show, Here Lies Love, was a fairly political show, about Imelda Marcos and the Marcos family in the Philippines. And so that only happened that story. It only happened in the 80s, which was 40 years ago, and so it's fresh with a lot of people, especially in the Filipino community. So there was a lot of nuance of like, okay, if you're approaching Filipino investors, what side of that story are they on? Because it's not a story that happened 200 years ago. This is like people were alive today that were part of that whole event in Philippine history. So, so the best part, I would say, even though it's like tiring to make all those phone calls and pursue that money, I met so many people, so many amazing people, and learned about them and their stories and how they could or could not support. And I'd say the worst part was the emotional roller coaster of it all. You like find an investor who's like ready to give $100,000 in one swoop, and then they call the next day and they're like, actually, I can't. And thought you finished the line or finished, you're raised and crossed the finish line, but then you're pushed back again. And so all the way up until opening week, opening night. And then just kind of things that come up out of nowhere. Our biggest uphill battle was, and this is public knowledge, so I'm okay to talk about it. But we had a run-in with the 802 Musicians Union, where David Byrne, the writer of the show, Talking Heads, he meant the show to be a piece where most of the music was recorded because he's trying to do an homage to karaoke culture in the Philippines. And the misinterpretation of that went around the community, saying that we didn't support musicians and that we wanted canned music just to save money. But the point of the piece was that at the end of the show, there is a live played song to contrast the artificial nature of canned music. and also a reflection of the 70s and 80s where the show takes place, and how discotheques were big, and there were karaoke stars that were in those places that Filipinos really admired, especially Imelda Marcos. So that was a trying time. I would say that was really hard to get through, because it really was like, a lot of people were saying things that weren't true about the company or the producers. And, there were a lot of assumptions that went around about the purpose of that artistic intention. And it really felt like like a Romeo and Juliet type thing, like Tale of Two Houses. It was like, friends were fighting with each other on social media about the topic. It was awful. And the scars of that still exist to now. But that was something that we couldn't have seen coming. And we got through it. We found a good negotiation point finally, after all of that, and we were able to move forward with the show. But it's just extreme highs and extreme lows in the Broadway arena. And it's kind of like you put in a lot of work for a huge payoff. Um, and that's not even winning a Tony Award. That's just, you did something on Broadway that was incredible and history making. And I was really, really grateful to be part of that, and it led to the projects that I'm on now, which are super exciting. So, but yeah, I hope that answered the question. I feel like I was meandering.
Oh, it did. No, no. So what project? Well, I wanted to ask you a question, but I'm going to go to this. What projects are you working on now, and that you're excited about, and how do you choose what projects to take on, since there's such a huge time commitment?
Sure. So I will say that when a Broadway show closes, I've now experienced another version of post-show depression. So it's like when I'm going to say normal, but like in regular circumstances, when you're in a show, like whether it's community theater, regional, whatever, when the show's over, you're kind of sad. When your Broadway show closes, you are very sad. Like the closing night was, it's been a more emotional night than I've had in a very long time. We were all crying. It was like outrageous, but it was, so much love for our show. But then I went through this period of like, I need to just keep on going. And I did the thing where I said yes to too many things, because I didn't know better, because it was the first show that closed for me. And I took on a lot. I was on Suffs for a little bit, the Tony Award winning show now, and then I was touching on two new projects that are in development with the producer Hal Luftig: Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, and
Mm-hmm.
Becoming Nancy, that's testing over in London this fall. And those are three projects that I had to walk away from, because it was a lot, because I thought, I raised for Here Lies Love, I can do this. And I didn't realize now I was doing that times three. So, which is super stressful. So the new projects, or the projects that I settled on, I decided to be more strategic and purposeful about what takes up my time, really, and what was more plausible. So the projects I'm on right now, one of them is all the way down, and not down, but at the cabaret level with Latido. I'm producing a solo cabaret mini tour. And tour is not the right word, because it's not like a tour. It's just engagements in different cities. And it's with Vincent Rodriguez III, who was on the TV show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. He played Josh Chan. And so he was trained in musical theater, but he's known as a TV star. So we met a year ago in 2023 in the fall, during a Here Lies Love event at Joe's Pub, because he was in the Off-Broadway cast. I had no idea. And so we brought him in as an alum of the show, and we just started talking, and we've come up with this solo cabaret tour because, we want to show the world that he can do live performing, and that he's trained in musical theater, and to tell his real story of his life, because a lot of people don't really know. So that's one project that's launching actually on September 18th in Pittsburgh, at City Winery. And then the next project that I'm on, the next step up, is a premiere at the Kennedy Center in DC. It's a children's show called Spells of the Sea. I chose that because of two reasons. One, my co-lead producer, and this is my first chance to lead produce a full production at the commercial level. Her name is Megan Ann Rasmussen, and she was a co-producer on Harmony that was on Broadway the same season as Here Lies Love. And we met, and she asked me to come on board. And she's a lovely person and so hardworking and awesome to work with. And so she believed in me enough to bring me on. And that project is actively still going right now. They just started rehearsals. And so with that project, one reason was her. The other reason was the writer of the show. And that's kind of why I signed on to Here Lies Love. So a lot of why I choose projects has to do with the world, or in the world of um, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, or underrepresented voices. And that's not just necessarily race based. That's, ability, it's religion, it's sexual identity, all of these things, gender, because there are, to no one's surprise, a lot of underrepresented voices in the world. And so I try to make that my aim. But in this first kind of couple of years in the commercial producing arena, I've been kind of focusing on Asian American voices, or what's officially AANHPI, Asian American Native Hawaiian um, Pacific Islander voices. And so the show Spells of the Sea was written by a young Filipino American woman. Her name is Guinevere Govea. She's in her mid-20s, so super young, super new. And she wrote this entire show. The songs, she did book, music, and lyrics. She brought in a collaborator, Anna, her name's Anna, to work with her. But it came out of Guinevere's, or Gwenny's, heart, this show. And it started as a podcast, and it went to a festival in St. Louis and won some awards, including an actor award for Gwenny because she played the lead. And now it's making its regional premiere at the Kennedy Center before we take on bringing it to Off-Broadway. So I chose that show. Not only do I love the story, which people can check it out on spellsofthesea.com, but to help support this new young writer who has a great ear and storytelling technique. And it's a moment that she needs to get out there. And I really like her work a lot. And then the third project, that's the Broadway level project, was I got pulled into Smash. I'm sure you and Heather know Smash so well, and people listening love Smash. It's such a community beloved show that was on NBC in 2012, that had unfortunately only had 2 seasons. But Smash went through it's now 2012, so like a 14-year process of figuring itself out as a Broadway musical. And so that one I chose to be part of because, on one hand, I will be super honest and say that every now and then you need to support a project that you know is going to be, I'm not going to say a hit because people might not like it, I don't know, but a project that is just super consistent, and it's a beneficial production that will be great for everybody involved, in terms of reputation and financially speaking as well. Every now and then I believe that you should sign on to a project like that. The reason why I love Smash, in addition to the fact that I just love the TV show, is that they really are making an effort to include underrepresented storylines in the show. So without giving too much away, they've made some character changes to the show. They've made some characters of color instead. They've really changed some of the characters to have different sexual orientations and identities. And it hasn't affected the skeleton of the story by very much. There is one big plot twist, though, that I will not give away because it's humongous, but you'll have to wait till spring of next year to find out. But I think with Smash, that part of it is why, and then the other part of it is there are some folks, like I said earlier, people that I never thought I would be on the same project with, kind of ever in my life, but the fact that Steven Spielberg is a lead producer on this musical is, to me, outrageous in the best way. I'm like, never have I ever would I put my name and his name in the same sentence, and so it's very cool in that, and the whole team is just top tier. The show is in great hands. Steven Spielberg, Neil Marin and Robert Greenblatt are the three lead producers. Robert Greenblatt being the gentleman who is the executive producer on Gilded Age on HBO on Max, and Neil Marin, who also has equally as many TV entertainment film credits, and then it's being directed by Susan Stroman, and Mark Shaman is back doing the music, and they're pretty much reuniting a lot of people on the TV show. Josh Bergasse, who was the choreographer, and they're confirming cast now. So it's exciting, and we have a lot of time. Here Lies Love was different in the sense that it was a short timeline. So it was like hurry, 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 fundraise, fundraise. With Smash, there's some breathing room. They had their closed rehearsal workshop back in February of this year, 2024, and so they have from then until our slate to open is in the spring of 2025. So there's breathing room to really raise money and find quality investors who believe in the project. But unlike Here Lies Love, where it was a new topic for anybody that's not really steeped in the Filipino community, Smash sells like hotcakes. It is incredible. You mentioned Smash, and right away people are like, "I love Smash. It's the best. Like, where do I sign?" And it's because they know the viability of this intellectual property, that it is well known and it's going to be as popular as it will be when it opens. Um, so yeah, those three are the kind of my main focuses this fall. One is a tour, one is a children's show regional premiere, one is a Broadway musical. There's a couple of others, but they're not slated till next year. I am working on two off-Broadway musicals. One is called Musical Therapy, which that one is slated for around the same time as Smash. And then the other one is called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is it's not a new show. It's been around for a little bit, but it's time for it to make that jump to off Broadway, and actually originates from here in Pittsburgh by a writer named Greg Correston, who is incredible. He connected with me a few months ago, and so we're trying to work this out for him. But and Musical Therapy was Dan Haas and Joey Katsarubis from one. Joey's from Chicago, Dan is from LA, but it's in terms of time commitments and kind of figuring all of that. I think what's really important is figuring out where things fall on a timeline, especially when things open. If you can gauge when a show will open, you can gauge how you can schedule your fundraising and kind of work schedule leading up to opening night. With the tour, it's a little different because it's not opening night per se, it's different engagements, but we've kind of boiled that down to a science of like, you need 3 days. You need a rehearsal day, you need a meeting day, and then you need show day. And then you go from there. But so yeah, that's how I've chosen the projects I have now and why I am here in this boat with these projects.
So, okay, what's a commonly held belief about Broadway productions and producing on Broadway that you absolutely passionately disagree with?
Disagree. Okay. A lot of people think that, and I'll say this is a belief that I disagree with because it's a myth. A lot of people outside of the Broadway producing community think that Broadway producers are super duper rich, that you have a lot of money and that you produce on Broadway because like you have a lot of money, and that when your show happens, whether it closes or not or keeps going, that you are just rolling in money. Definitely not true. Like co-producing is a give or get kind of job. So you can either put it in yourself or you can go and find it. And I will absolutely say the majority of co-producers go and find it. Nobody is sitting on $500,000 in their back pocket to do a show. And then when it comes to earning money from a show, the myth here is that co-producers get a lot of money from ticket sales and things that the show benefits from, weekly grosses, but that's not true. Co-producers, we don't get paid at all, really. Like we get included in a profit share agreement, but that's only dependent upon if your show recoups its costs and then stays open long enough to get to the profit part, because the profit part doesn't happen until the show recoups its investor money first. And that is, the chances of that are, and this, most people are like, what? It is 1 in 4. 1 in 4 Broadway shows. So you have 25% of a chance to recoup and get your profit money. So I do have to say that co-producing is more a labor of love, um, rather than you go and produce a show, you co-produce a show on Broadway because you want to make money. So it is shocking to people. It's almost like backward thinking, like, well, why do you do it if you don't earn money? But you really find the people that are really passionate about the show. Now, it's a different story if you come in as a lead producer. Lead producers are the bosses, and so they get the benefit of the profit share first. Co-producers get their cut from the lead producer's cut. So, lead producers are in the same boat. They too have to wait until recoupment happens, but they're more likely to get their money back first, or get their paycheck first, so to speak. Um, the kind of direct statement about being a producer at any level, but especially at the Broadway level, is everybody else gets paid first. You get paid last, very, very last. So a lot of people think producers get paid first, and that's not true. We're the ones that take care of everyone else in the room before we even see a fraction of the money that we either raised or put in. And so I hope me saying that helps clarify for a lot of people, because I think it also helps make the decision for new people whether they want to do it or not. So a lot of producers still have a day job or a client-based job or a freelancing job, because co-producing does not pay the bills until you have co-produced enough or haven't had enough projects that end up recouping, and you get your percentage of the profit share should the show stay open long enough. So a specific example is co-producers of Hamilton. They're still making their money because Hamilton is still open. It has several tours, and it's still on Broadway. So those co-producers are good. But with shows that close, like Here Lies Love, we're not. So, and that's just what it is. I think that's part of the reality too of going through that post-show depression, is like, you have to be real with yourself and say you did all that work and be proud of doing all that work, but know that a monetary benefit is not part of that. But what did we do? We helped create opportunity for people who are of Filipino identity. We put another show that centered on people of color on Broadway, and put a first of its kind story in the community on Broadway, and also did a lot of firsts technically with the show. So while, sure, if we're going to talk about money, was not a good return for me, but if we're going to talk about career and milestones and accomplishments, it is beyond anything that you could ever measure with money. So, yeah.
What does inclusion mean to you when it comes to theater?
Inclusion to me means equity when it comes to that in theater, and equity in the sense of um, telling stories that matter, and not telling stories just to tell a story. Um, you know, Ideally, art helps people form opinions and starts conversations. And, so if we're going to go back to the question of how do I pick things, I look for that as well. I look for inclusion in the sense of it's something that will help make change in the world, or help bring awareness to something that needs it. So inclusion isn't just about showing, like, people showing their physical being in a space like a television or on a stage, um, but it's also the stories, like including stories to give a fuller picture of what the world looks like, because that's that phrase, right, that art reflects life, reflects art. um, you know if art is only one form of story or one kind of people, it's incomplete, and then you form misconceptions about what society is and what the world is. So inclusion to me in that equity lens is you're telling a balanced amount of stories and situations that really illustrate what exists in the world around you. Because put it simply, if we only saw stories about rich people, people would think that, oh, well, the world is super rich. There's nobody around that. There's no stories about people that are struggling. How is that? Or if we only saw stories about people that had office jobs and became wildly successful, you know, media and art is a way for people to learn about the world if they don't experience it already. That's why people watch movies. That's why people watch TV shows. They want to see things and learn things because people are constantly learning, whether they like to think so or not. And so, um, yeah, inclusion to me in theater and the arts is providing a holistic view um, of what's in our society, what's in our world, even what's in our universe, if we're going to talk about space, but science, so yeah, it goes beyond the obvious inclusion, which is, the way people look. It goes to a much deeper level.
What does immersion mean to you?
Immersion, I think it's experience. Immersion is experience something in a deeper way than you would say just reading a book. You know, um, Immersion in regards to the theater that I'm helping produce, specifically talking about Here Lies Love. Theater is supposed to create the world that the audience is supposed to kind of buy into, right? The suspension of disbelief, and feeling like what's in front of you is real. We took that a step further. We immersed people in the world of the show. We transformed the Broadway theater into a discotheque, and the runways of the stage went all the way around the theater, where you could be sitting in the upper mezzanine, and there would be actors in front of you performing. If you were on what we called the dance floor, because we removed the orchestra section to make a big runway that was the main stage. Actors were around you. You were inside of scenes. Platforms were moving around you, and I think the immersive part of that show. And I will disclaim this by saying I'm not the director, so if I misquote, I'm only speaking from my experience of being on the dance floor, because otherwise Alex Timbers would be the guy to talk to. But I felt like I was in the show at very important parts. So Here Lies Love had a lot to do with rallies and political rallies and protests and riots, and being on that floor and having it all around you. You were immersed in the actual world physically, not just observing from a voyeur point of view from a seat in the audience. Um, so I'd say, immersive, that's the obvious part, but I think the other part of it too is immersing yourself in the sense of you get to you get to react to it up close. You're not just whispering to your seat partner, and really feeling it around you. And then I feel it accomplishes that same purpose of driving conversation.
This is a podcast that is focused on playwrights. So I want to end our conversation here with this question. What advice do you have for playwrights out there who just want their pieces to be seen? What can we do to make that happen?
Um, I think, well, one part of it is don't be afraid to ask the question of someone who produces new works. Um, I think there's a lot of folks that think they're a burden if they're sliding into someone's direct messages or sending an email or making a phone call or shooting a text. Um, while most people in the seat of putting the work out there for writers, yes, they can be very busy, but you know, I I'll just speak personally. I'm never coming from a point of view of like, God, I wish I didn't hear from so many people about their work. No, I love hearing from people about their work because I'm always looking for the next thing to support or the next thing to help put out there in whatever way that may be. With some projects, it's a reading. With some projects, we're going to go all the way to a production of it. Or in some projects, it's going to go off Broadway because it's time. Or supporting creating a backers audition to find investors for a project. So really, at any point of the journey, whether it's a reading all the way up to full production, I think the way writers can really get their work out there is just keep it's a form of hustling. You just got to ask the question. The advice that I give young people that I talk to, and it's weird for me to call people young people because I don't think I'm an older person yet, but what I tell kind of college grads is that, you know, always ask, because the worst they can say is no. And then the addendum to that is, if they say no, you're asking the wrong person, which is a part that I kind of stole from, or not stole, but borrowed from Kris Jenner, who most people are like, Kris Jenner, what? Like Kim Kardashian's mom? I'm like, no, she's right. Would she have the empire she did if she just heard no and sat down? No, she heard no and she asked the next person. So, um, the way it applies to writers is keep asking people to help with your work, especially producers, because you never know which one is going to be the right one, and the one who has the 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 space in their schedule to take on your story. And if it's not at that point in time, you will have at least told them about it, and it'll be in their mind for later. Because that's happened to me too, where people have approached me about stuff and I just couldn't, or I didn't have the capacity at the time. And then I came back later, or it came back to me later. Both have happened to me. And then I get involved. You know, I will say Here Lies Love was one of those. I didn't know how Here Lies Love would affect my life, but I did hear about it in 2013 when it was at the public, and I heard about it from my co-founder of Latido, just as something we should go see. And then I missed it. So I said, well, I'm never going to see that again. I don't know how often Filipino stories happen at that level. Um, and then just through life and talking to people and always keeping in the back of my mind if it ever came up to see again, it circled back around, and I heard about it, and that time I was ready for it. And I said, I'm a producer now, so I'm going to try and get in on this as a producer. And it worked out. I kept asking around. I think a specific example, I messaged like 3 different people that I knew had a connection to the show. And one of the 3 was the one that turned out to be Laura, who connected me to Clint, which got me there. So, not that the other people said no, they just didn't know the answer. And so, so yeah, that's on the producing side. But writing side, same principle. Keep telling people about your projects, because there will be that person that says, okay, let's do it. And then you go forth.
This has been Don Michael Mendoza. You're a triumph. You're an absolute triumph, and I love that I know you. I think that's all, and I can't wait till we're offline so I can ask you how you can help me with my project.
Of course.
So, as always, this episode has been brought to you by Point Park University's MFA in Writing for Screen and Stage. I went there. I hope you can check them out. Don, Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you again, and I hope we cross paths again in the podcast space in the future. Let me know.
Absolutely.